Hello and welcome, I'm the Rambling Director. Well, I'm finally back into sweater weather where I live, which means that it's time to do more Halloween videos. And this, in this case, is actually about the Halloween franchise, which, as I've said repeatedly on this channel, is my favorite franchise of all time. Made more videos about the Halloween franchise than anything else on this channel, which is almost kind of sad when you think about it. Today, we're going to be ranking all of the masks that Michael Myers has ever worn. There's going to be a few caveats, though, going into that. There's three types of masks we will not be talking about today. The first is the CGI mask from H2O. It was made to fix a mistake. It was made to correct a problem, and they were not able to go back and reshoot those elements. So actually adding a composite mask over top of the K&B mask made a lot of sense, and it saved them potentially millions of dollars rather than reshooting it. It just made a lot of sense at the time, and besides that, you only see it for about 2 seconds of the film. If you don't know it's there, it's really easy to miss it, so I'm not going to be talking about that. Second, the pink-skinned blonde mask from Part 4. Rumors have abounded about this mask since I was a kid. First story I ever heard was that in Part 4 they were going to give that mask to Michael and then ended up going with the more traditional look instead, but that one shot was already filmed, so they just kept it in the movie. That actually is not what happened. According to crew that were there, a stagehand just grabbed the wrong mask that day. They were already on the location, they were overtime and didn't have the budget to reschedule, and everybody was just exhausted because it was a terrible, arduous shoot for most people involved. And so they just thought, well, it's only in the movie for 2 seconds, it's in the shadows, maybe nobody will notice. And sadly, it became one of the most ridiculed elements of horror movie history. But as a director myself, I know what it's like to get to a location and not have the time or money to go back and refilm, but then you're there on location and oops, we forgot something. Now that thing has to be cut from the movie. And I can understand also trying to make these really radical fixes, but just not having exactly what I need to be able to make it believable, and then there's just a mistake in your movie and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm not going to be ranking that here because I would have to put it very low on the list, but it's not really fair. The only people I ever hear complain about the mask, by the way, are people that I know for a fact have never made a movie. And so they can say things, they can afford to say things like, that's inexcusable. There's no excuse for that. They were lazy filmmakers. Which is very easy to say when you sit in your ivory tower and do nothing creative with your life. I, however, do, so I'm going to cut them a break and just not count it on this list. Lastly, we're not going to be talking about any of the paper mache masks in Rob Zombie's Halloween. They're not featured prominently enough, and just to be frank, they're not the Michael Myers mask. If I was going to rank them, then I'd have to end up ranking the Silver Shamrock masks, and that wouldn't be fair either, because there's no comparison to be had between those masks, so we're leaving them out of this ranking. So with all that said, let's get into it, starting with number 16. The K&B mask. Some of you may not know the history behind this, but basically, Halloween H2O started production with the K&B mask. This mask has very big cutouts for the eyes, which has iconically given it sort of an alien-like appearance. I actually don't think it looks like an alien. Besides the eye holes, it actually looks like Shatner did in the 90s. It's kind of cool when you think about it. It's almost like an aged-up version of the Halloween mask. But nonetheless, it did look weird, so they cut it out. And so all you can really see is these shots from the trailer, but it does look weird, and they probably made a good choice. Next is the mask from Halloween 5. I've always had a bee in my bonnet about this one. It's the neck, specifically. You see, the mask from Part 4, which fit George P. Wilbur, did not fit stuntman Don Shanks, so they had to remold the mask completely, and for whatever reason, it's almost like they made it simultaneously too big for him and too small for him, because the neck does not close properly on this mask, and so the skin flaps just flap about. And what's kind of cool about the original 78 mask, and Halloween 2 as well, is that the mask kind of joins up with the neck of the person wearing it, and it looks like skin. It looks almost like it's their real face, but with black eyes. The devil's eyes. And that's important to the metaphor, right? In Halloween 5, the mask just looks derpy, and I don't mean like the cute kind of derpy like this, I mean the accidentally funny kind of derpy like this. Next is Halloween Ends. By the time this mask started getting mold on it, I just thought it was getting too much. And same with the next selection, Halloween Kills. Yeah, the more burns and mold, and it's adding too much detail onto a face that is meant to be a lack of a character. Does that make sense? By the time you get to Halloween Kills, you're just adding a lot of personality to a face that is not supposed to have any. So to me, it's quite low on the list. Next is the Stan Winston mask from H2O. This was the mask that replaced the K&B mask. It is significantly better, and I actually like it in a lot of ways. To me, it feels like the sort of Halloween mask that I would expect from the Scream era of slasher movies, which of course Kevin Williamson worked on this film, and it does have a lot of very Scream elements, which is one of the reasons why Chris Durand is not highly remembered among the Michael Myers pantheon, primarily because of the writing around his character. Now, the reason that this mask is so low on the list, despite the fact that it is a big improvement on the K&B mask, really just comes down to this. You can see his eyes the whole time. Now, that actually wouldn't have been a bad idea if Halloween 7 had been following up on Halloween 6. Because Halloween 6 introduces the idea that Michael is not in control of his own actions. The reason I think this would have been cool is because the Stan Winston mask, because it's so tight on his face, because you can see his eyes, you can see his eyebrows in some shots, it actually gives Michael kind of a panicked look, almost like he's trapped behind the mask. That could have been really cool if we had kept up with that cult thing from part 6, but unfortunately we didn't, so instead it just gives him, again, kind of this odd derpy quality to his face, which I don't think they were really wanting to go for, but nonetheless it's what happened. Now, I know there are going to be some people who will hate me for saying this, but I really like the mask in Halloween by Rob Zombie. The 2007 Halloween recreates the mask completely. It's not a Shatner mask, it's a completely original mask. And it actually looks kind of like what I would imagine a Michael Myers mask that was custom made for Spencer's would look like. Something that was kind of reimagining the mask with the Spencer's brand on it. Like an off-brand Michael Myers, but not in the same way that Halloween Part 4 looked like an off-brand Michael Myers. It actually takes some of that bulkiness from Part 5 that I didn't like and actually makes it work fairly well, probably because Michael Myers is the size of a freaking house in this movie. The modern aged mask from Halloween 2007, I really like it second best in that category because I think actually it's a pretty unique way of adding age to the mask, but it keeps it featureless in all the right ways. The aging, unlike Kills and Ends, does not add character to the mask. It adds character to the mask, but it doesn't make the mask more of a character. And next, and again, this will be probably a controversial one if this video picks up any traction, but I like the mask in Halloween 2 even better. And I'm talking about the Rob Zombie Halloween 2. I know, it's kind of a half mask. It's like torn off his face a little bit. I love that. I know you're not supposed to see Michael's face, but the thing is, in Rob Zombie's Halloween, Michael is actually a character. In the original Halloween timeline, Michael is not a character, he's a force of nature. But in Rob Zombie's movie, he is a character. He is a fleshed out three-dimensional character, and I think that works a lot better when we see the mask being torn away, almost like his humanity is shining through as he's having all these weird visions and stuff, and we're kind of getting to know him a little bit on a deeper level. Take it with a grain of salt, I suppose. I know not everybody will find that to be a good line of reasoning, but to me, in the timeline of the Rob Zombie movies, I think it works. Next up is Halloween Resurrection. I really like the mask in Halloween Resurrection. It's kind of very angular lips, but besides that, I think it's a huge improvement on H2O's mask. Any of the masks in H2O. It really works on a number of levels. It keeps that featurelessness, but it also kind of gives him a more menacing expression. I don't think that that's necessarily what Michael should have. But since there are like 12 Halloween movies with Michael Myers, why not give him one with a little bit of a menacing expression? I don't see any problem with that. And I also think the mask looks really good on Busta Rhymes, if that is any indication of anything at all. Next is Halloween 4. I love this movie. This was actually the first Halloween movie I ever saw when I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old. And I love this movie. So I can't be as hard on this mask as some people are because maybe they're more objective. But to me, this was my first Michael Myers. This was the Michael Myers mask I saw in my nightmares as a 7-year-old, okay? So to me, it will always have a special kind of place. That being said, I did say in my review, I think I said that he looks like the Gumby Michael Myers, or like the Walmart brand Michael Myers, Marty Marvin, or something like that. And I stand by that. In hindsight, he doesn't really look very Michael Myers. He does kind of look like an off-brand, which is odd because apparently these were the Dawn Post masks, made from the same mold as the original 78 mask. And in some shots, you can tell it's clearly William Shatner. Whether it just fit George P. Wilbur's head funny, or if there was an issue with the mold by that point, maybe they used the wrong paint. I don't know what the issue was, but it ends up looking like Data from Star Trek and Michael Jackson had a baby, which is really weird. But that being said, if it's your first Michael Myers, I really think there is a lot to love about George P. Wilbur's performance in this. And overall, the mask does not look that bad compared to something like the K&B mask. And sure, some people have valid criticisms with Halloween 4. A lot more people have invalid criticisms with Halloween 4. But to me, it will always hold a special place in my heart to watch Data from Star Trek, spray-painted white, crawling around a truck killing hillbillies. Next is the mask from the intro of Halloween H2O. Now, I know so many masks in Halloween H2O. There's actually 3 real masks and then the CGI correction mask. This mask was almost the same mask from Halloween 6. In fact, some people say that it was the same mask. I've not seen anything to verify that. But whatever the reason, they put him in that mask in the first scene where he kills Marion Chambers, and then he never wears the mask again. Some people say that they did it to get away from Halloween 6 and create more of an original image. I kind of have my doubts if that is the real reason, because it doesn't seem like that much of a carryover. I mean, if you were going to do that, then just give Michael a brand new mask altogether, rather than even trying to emulate the mask from the 78 film. But whatever the reason, they didn't use it in the rest of the film. I struggle to post it any higher up on this ranking, though, simply because we only see it in little bits and bobs here and there. We never see it in full light. We never see it in a stalking scene, so it's hard to say if it would have held up or really been that much better, but it also is hard to imagine it could have been that much worse than the K&B mask. Now we're getting into the real meat of it, the top 5. First, Halloween 2. Now, this was a completely original mask made for the 1981 Halloween 2. It was not based on any previous masks. It's nothing like the 1978 mask at all. I was just waiting for everybody to, actually me in the comments. I think they're all gone now, so we can continue having an adult conversation. Yeah, so Halloween 2 used the exact same mask from Halloween 1978. It, in fact, looks very different, though. Now, there's a few different reasons for this and a few different stories as to why that might have been the case. The first reason is that Nick Castle and Dick Warlock just had very differently shaped heads. That seems to check out because the mask fits Dick Warlock much tighter in Halloween 2 than it did Nick Castle in Halloween 1. Another reason that it looks so different is that it's kind of dingy and brown. Now, there's two potential reasons I've heard for this. The first is that the mask was at Nick Castle's house for a little while and set on his mantle above a working fireplace. The second is that Deborah Hill kept it under her bed, and she apparently was a chain smoker. So perhaps the white spray paint was dingied up from her smoking or from the smoke from his fireplace. It's hard to tell. Whatever the reason, the mask is a completely different color. And for whatever reason, the prop guys did not decide to give it a fresh coat of paint. So it looks very different. And it doesn't have that same almost ethereal glow that it does in the 78 film. However, I can't really put it any lower on the list because it's literally the mask from the original film. I can't really put it any higher on the list because I don't think it looks as good as it did in the 78 film. If you told me it was a completely different mask, I'd totally buy it. However, it was the same, so I felt it had to be in the top 5. And it is an iconic look. In fact, I think a lot of people see the mask from Halloween 2, and that is really their image of how they imagine Michael Myers' mask, because it was so heavily used in advertising when I was growing up that I feel like most of my generation really does see it as Michael's mask, but it's not. And yet it is. Strange things that this series has made me think about. Number 4, Halloween 666, The Curse of the Origin of Michael Myers. If they couldn't even come up with a title and stick to it, it kind of tells you a lot about the production. And it's true, Halloween 6 is one of the most divisive films in the franchise. Some people say it is a train wreck. Some people like me actually really love it. I think the producer's cut of the film is actually a really good film, but I did already do a full review of the film, so let's not fixate on that. Let's talk about The Mask, which is a real return to form after Halloween 4 and Halloween 5. This mask feels like it's at least in the same universe as the first two films. In fact, this mask feels kind of like it would be what Silver Shamrock would produce and call a Michael Myers mask. It's got a little more detail in it, but it keeps it vague and vacant and blank in all the right ways. I just love this mask. And from the first time I saw it, I thought that might be like one of the iconic Michael Myers masks. It looks threatening, but not overtly. It doesn't look surprised or shocked like the mask in Halloween 4, where it looks like Michael is politely waiting to ask you a question. This one looks more like it was made by the same company that made the in-universe mask in 78. I'm not talking about Dawn Post, but whatever company made this odd white featureless mask in the film's universe. It feels like a real evolution of the same mask over the years, a bit like there's been variations of the Ghostface mask over the years. Whereas a lot of the others, they didn't even feel like they were meant to be made from the same mold or by the same company. Now, my number 3 is one that a lot of you would not even think about as a Michael Myers mask. And perhaps it isn't. Perhaps it's unfair that I'm including it when I didn't include Rob Zombie's paper mache masks. But it's my list. So make your own if you don't like it. The bandages from Part 4. I have long stood by that after they reinvented Jason Voorhees like 8 times, this would have been the perfect time to reinvent Michael Myers. He is critically burned after the events of Part 2. And in Part 4, the first time we see him, his face is fully bandaged up, and the bandages are in the exact shape of the mask from 78. It covers the same length on his neck as the real mask, but it has the added advantage that the eye holes are a little narrower, and it keeps his eyes in shadow despite the fact that there's nothing covering them. It's really intimidating. It keeps the same featureless blankness that we're used to. It's a nice homage to old movie monsters. And on top of that, it's just way more intimidating than the Gumby mask that ended up in the finished film. Number 2, Halloween 2018. Well, I guess despite my numerous criticisms of the series, in fact, even making a whole video about how I would have improved it to make the new trilogy a more marketable and audience-friendly trilogy, there are a lot of things it does really right. And I can't fault David Gordon Green as being anything less than a really good director. It really needs to be praised as one of the best, maybe the best, attempt at aging this mask. It did what Rob Zombie's second film couldn't do. It did what all of the original timeline refused to do. It made this mask look 40 years older without adding any personality to it. It does add some character, but it doesn't make Michael into a character. This still feels like a generic dollar store mask, which is how Michael Myers should feel. So bravo to the entire team on 2018 for creating a mask that really does hold up and look like a proper successor to the '78 original. And with that said, Number 1, Halloween 1978, and the flashback mask from Halloween Kills. Halloween Kills obviously did a lot wrong. For me, it might be I hate to say that, but it might be one of the lowest points in the entire franchise. However, something it does absolutely perfect is that flashback opening scene. In fact, I think that flashback should have opened 2018. But for whatever reason it didn't. The mask, though, does, sort of like in 2018's aged up mask, it actually does what none of the original timeline or the Laurie Strode timeline could do at all. It recreates the '78 mask as perfectly as it could ever be recreated. And in my mind, it's the same mask. I mean, it's indistinguishable. It's perfect. So I had to throw it in at number 1 along with the original because it is the best recreation we've ever gotten and the best recreation we're ever likely to get. But let's be real here, the real number 1 is the 1978 original. There's an old saying that genius isn't in complexity, it's in simplicity. And the Halloween mask proves that in spades. This is, as you all know if you're watching this list, a Bill Shatner mask. They spray painted it white, took off the sideburns, and cut out wider eye holes. And I've actually seen a YouTuber who took a Spock mask and gave it the Michael Myers treatment. And I kind of like that too. It kind of shows that, like, really the shape could be anybody. Like, that is kind of the genius of the Shatner mask, is it has no personality. Even though you can kind of tell it is Shatner, it also isn't. It's like a variant of anybody and everybody. It is that perfect stranger that blends into a crowd. It is possibly the greatest, most iconic Halloween mask ever created, and it was literally a store-bought mask that they spray painted white. That is real simplicity and real genius. And to my mind, of course, it's the iconic Michael Myers mask. But did you expect anything else to be number 1 on the list? Alright, that's all I got for today, everybody. Thank you for watching, God bless you, and I will see you in the next one.